On a cold, snowy Christmas Eve, a long display of finely dressed ladies and gentlemen were walking their children towards a glowing house at the end of the street. Inside the house, the Stahlbaums were busy adding the final touches to their Christmas Eve party, with Clara placing a glittering angel atop the Christmas tree. "Oh, how magical," said her mother. The children danced and played with their new toys, while the adults performed their own fine dance, with Grandma and Grandpa attempting to join in as well. The room was buzzing with music and laughter, until a door opened and a hush fell. The last guest had arrived, a mysterious-looking man in a black cloak. The children were all scared of him, including Clara and her little brother Fritz. The man was their godfather, the toy maker, Herr Drosselmeyer. Drosselmeyer requested that his godchildren come and speak with him. Tentatively, they crept forwards. But when Drosselmeyer voiced that he would put on a show for them, they quickly forgot their fears and gathered with all the children as 2 sets of life-sized clockwork dolls were rolled out. He wound up the dolls and they came jerkily to life. 2 beautiful Harlequin dolls clicked their heels and twirled around the room. Then, fiery soldier dolls sprung to life. They whirled and whizzed fantastically fast. Drosselmeyer looked on proudly. When the dance was over, he beckoned to Clara. "Here is a present just for you." When Fritz saw Clara was getting another present, he felt left out. Fumbling around in his pockets, Drosselmeyer fished out a large roasted nut and gave it to him. Drosselmeyer had presented Clara with a wooden soldier. "It's a nutcracker," explained Drosselmeyer. "Watch this." And he placed a nut in the soldier's mouth and cracked it open. Clara took her nutcracker and held it close. "Thank you, Godfather." She loved the nutcracker's handsome face, the expression in his dazzling green eyes, and for a moment she almost thought he was smiling at her. Fritz was watching Clara dancing with her new nutcracker, and he became clouded with jealousy. "I want a turn!" cried Fritz, trying to snatch the nutcracker. But Clara began to tease Fritz, holding the nutcracker just out of reach. Suddenly, Fritz got hold of the wooden soldier and began running away, with Clara chasing after him. "No, don't!" she cried. Suddenly, Fritz tripped, and the nutcracker tumbled out of his hands and broke in 2. Fritz, ashamed, ran away to hide. Clara picked up the pieces and went to put her broken toy away. When she saw Drosselmeyer, she quickly hid the nutcracker, afraid he would be angry. But he spoke softly to her. "Don't worry," he said. "Give it to me." Drosselmeyer, with a mysterious wave of his handkerchief, bandaged together the nutcracker. "Good as new," he told her. "He needs rest." Clara placed it in her dollhouse to keep it safe, and joined her friends in a dizzy whirl of dancing. The sky grew dark, the moon rose, and all too soon the party was over. The guests began to leave, saying their farewells to the Stahlbaums, and once the last guests had left, everyone went to bed. Clara was too excited to sleep. She tiptoed down the stairs to fetch her nutcracker. Picking him up and cradling him in her arms, she was about to dance around the room when she froze, and the clock struck midnight. Clara felt as if she was in a daze, when suddenly, out from the cracks in the walls scampered lots of angry, snarling rats, all scratching at her, reaching for the nutcracker. "Help!" Clara cried as the snarling rats began to tear at her nightgown. Out from a dark corner strode Herr Drosselmeyer, who scared the rats away. He began to comfort a very shaken Clara and instructed her to put her nutcracker back to bed. Then, with a magical wave of his hand, the Christmas tree began towering over her, its branches crackling and rustling. They seemed to be spreading, filling the room. "The tree's growing," Clara thought. "Unless I'm shrinking?" Clara stared around the room in wonder. The entire room was towering around her, and the Nutcracker was now the same size as her. Her brother's soldier dolls sprung to life and began marching around the room. A sudden scritch-scratch made her jump, and she ran to hide from the hordes of rats that were now filling the room. A soldier doll let off a loud of his musket, and the Nutcracker woke with a start. He alerted him to the rat invasion, and the Nutcracker began shouting commands as an orderly line of soldiers came marching out of a wooden fortress, brandishing muskets of their own. Clara could only stare as the toy soldiers surged across the room. "Into battle!" cried the Nutcracker as the leader of the rats, the Rat King, rushed into the fray, waving a huge silver sword. A frantic battle followed. Clara hid as the room filled with noise and smoke and the burnt, spicy smell of gunpowder. "Bow to me!" ordered the Rat King. "Never!" replied the Nutcracker, but he was cornered. The Rat King was about to overpower him. "No!" Clara screamed. She snatched off one of her slippers and ran towards the Rat King, hitting him firmly on the back of his head. He shuddered and staggered back. The Nutcracker seized his chance and defeated the Rat King. His rats looked on in horror and quickly scurried away, while the Nutcracker dropped to the floor, exhausted from battle. When the air cleared, Clara crept out from her hiding place and saw her poor Nutcracker lying lifeless on the floor. With tears brimming in her eyes, she didn't notice the Nutcracker stir. Then a gasp from his lips alerted her, and she saw her Nutcracker struggling to stand. "He's alive!" she cried, and helped her Nutcracker to his feet. Only he was no longer a Nutcracker, or even a soldier. He had transformed into a handsome prince. "You saved my life," he said. "Without you, I would have been imprisoned as a Nutcracker forever. Let me repay you. Let me take you on an adventure." With those words, the living room walls melted away, and a snowy forest grew up around them. A flurry of snowflakes tumbled from the sky, swirling into delicate snow fairies that whirled around. They soon became shimmering white dancers that waltzed and floated in the crisp winter air. Snow was falling thick and fast as they spun around and around. Clara found herself on a shimmering white sleigh with her Nutcracker prince. Herr Drosselmeyer had appeared and led the sleigh up through the night sky, soaring over forests and frozen lakes until they reached a magical land. They floated past pink marshmallow clouds and over mountains topped with butterscotch ice cream. Far below were glistening rivers of toffee, lakes of lemonade, and lollipop trees. The Land of Sweets held a magical castle made of frosted marzipan with gingerbread turrets and chocolate tiles. Inside the castle, the Sugar Plum Fairy was interrupted by the arrival of a prince and a young girl. "What brings you here?" the Sugar Plum Fairy asked. So, the Nutcracker told her a story. The story of how the Rat King had enchanted him and turned him into a Nutcracker. How the rats had come to Clara's home and the battle that followed. And he told her of Clara's bravery and the Rat King's defeat. "So it was you who saved the prince. The whole kingdom is grateful to you. This calls for a dance of celebration." As Clara and the prince sat on a throne made of cake, they were entertained by a dramatic Spanish dance. The dancers were dressed in velvety brown and made swirling moves, as if they were stirring thick hot chocolate. Next, Arabian dancers in soft silks swayed like rising steam in a coffee dance. Next came an athletic Chinese tea dance. The performers leaped and tumbled around the stage, springing lightly into the air. Then came a traditional Russian dance. Clara loved watching the dancers kicking high in the air with their candy cane crisp movements. Clara let the music wash over her as a chorus of flute players took to the stage, dressed in the colour of sweet marzipan, their nimble feet moving just as quickly as their fingers. Clara was amazed by how they could play and dance at once. Next came the sweet candy cane children, who danced joyfully for Clara. Clara watched in astonishment as a woman wearing a bright pink dress took to the stage. As she swept around the room, 2 children were running and hiding behind her. Then, to Clara's joy, lots of children came out and danced in bright, colourful dresses, their shining faces beaming around the hall. When they raced away, Clara found herself swaying to a gentle waltz of hundreds of ballerinas dressed as flowers. They gracefully took over the stage, dressed in soft pastels of flower petals. "Our celebration is almost at an end," said the prince. And with that, the Sugar Plum Fairy entered the stage with her cavalier. Heavenly music began to play as they dazzled everyone. With each movement, the 2 dancers mirrored each other perfectly. It seemed as if they were moving, even breathing as one person. Then the cavalier stood back and the Sugar Plum Fairy danced alone. Clara was entranced as the Sugar Plum Fairy spun around and around. She seemed light as a butterfly, her feet hardly touching the ground. Watching her whirl and leap for pure joy, Clara imagined that she was the one performing, that she was the one in the sparkling pink dress, that she was the one pirouetting with incredible grace. Everyone in the hall was just as rapt as Clara. As the dance finally came to an end, she looked radiant with happiness. All the performers then joined the Sugar Plum Fairy for a final dance all together. Clara didn't want the night to end. She knew she had just been given the most precious gift she could ever receive. "I don't ever want to leave," she said to the prince. "I don't want to say goodbye." She closed her eyes. She would store her memories of this night in her heart and treasure them for the rest of her life. When Clara opened her eyes, she was back home, curled up under the Christmas tree, her mother looking over her. It was morning. She looked around for her Nutcracker, but she couldn't find him anywhere. Then there was a knock on the door and Herr Drosselmeyer walked in, followed by a young handsome man, with dazzling green eyes and a strangely familiar face.